Hi, I'm Caroline Mitchell, Canine Behaviourist at Good Doggy. So it's really easy to focus on the behaviour that you don't want. When people contact me, they often tell me all about the things they don't want their dog to do. They'll tell me, I wish he could stop barking, or I wish he would stop jumping up on people, or I wish he would stop stealing, or lunging at other dogs, or stop pulling. But why is this a problem? Well, when you focus on all the stuff that you don't want, you run the risk of the training experience becoming quite negative. And not just for your dog, for you as well. You end up focusing on stopping behavior. You use the word no a lot. And this is important because focusing on what you don't want encourages you to become quite reactive, but only when things go wrong. So you don't start to really intervene with the behavior until you're already halfway through it. Or even worse, your dog has gone over threshold. When you start behavior training, when the unwanted behavior is already in progress, the behavior has already been rewarding for your dog. And all unwanted behavior is rewarding to the dog for some reason or other. If it wasn't, then the dog wouldn't be doing it. So they're doing it for a reason, and they repeatedly do it for a good reason. So we don't want to be getting involved with this right in the middle of the behavior. Once we do that, then we're in a kind of a retreat position. We're trying to stop the behavior, trying to undo it, and we're trying to scroll back. If your dog's already gone over threshold, then also that's a problem because now they're not even listening to you anymore, and everything you're doing is in vain. So timing is everything. When you focus on what you would rather see instead, you start to work a bit more proactively. You start to look at what you can do before the behavior has taken hold. You become proactive rather than reactive. And this makes things much more positive for you and your dog. If you want to greet people calmly, then you're going to start looking for opportunities and getting early with your sit cue. If you would rather your dog was walking on a loose lead, then you will help them achieve that. So you switch from a no trainer to a good dog trainer, which is quite different because what you're doing is you're getting in there nice and early and you're setting a precedent of the behavior you want. You're trying to get them to do it before they've started doing the unwanted behavior. You're getting in there certainly before they've reached threshold where they're not paying attention at all. And you are going to then start rewarding good behavior. So rather than saying no all the time, you're now saying good boy or good girl all the time, which actually just makes the whole experience much more positive. And because you've got in there before the unwanted behavior started, you're much more likely to be successful as well. A clicker also works best when you are using your clicker to capture good behavior that you have encouraged. A clicker is not meant to change behavior. You don't wait until the behavior is mid-cycle before you start clicking. You start early, you see an opportunity coming, you start clicking because you're letting them know, I want you to keep doing this. And you're just rewarding behavior that you have caught. That is what you want. That is your goal behavior. You can check out my video on capturing and shaping behavior. I'll put the link at the end, and that explains a lot more about how you can use a clicker to do that. So what do you want? This is the important thing. So whatever it is that you're working on, take a moment now just to have a think about what you wish your dog was doing instead. If you aren't sure, just wait until he's doing something that you don't want. And at that moment, then it may well become a lot more obvious when you're in that moment exactly what it is that you'd rather have. So if your dog is jumping up, for example, you might prefer them to sit. If your dog is pulling on the lead, you might prefer them to walk on a loose lead. If your dog is being quite reactive, you might want them to look at you. If your dog is running off after other dogs in the park, you might want them to recall to you. So you're going to start focusing on the behavior that you actually want. Once you know what you're aiming for, now we need to find a way to reward that is relevant to his goals. And if you aren't sure about goals, check out my video about why dogs aren't motivated by food. The link to that is at the end as well. So you can understand exactly what it is that your dog is trying to achieve with this behavior. Once you've figured out the goal and you've met the goal and you have a good reward, you have the recipe for success. Of course, it's not always as simple as that. Sometimes you have to break things down into manageable steps and practice things when the trigger or the distraction is not available. So, for example, maybe if you're trying to answer the front door with your dog and he's very hyper and he jumps all over everybody, and maybe what you just want him to do is to sit at the end of the hall and wait. If you show up at your training today and you ring the doorbell, you get your friend to come round and you try to train him at that moment, you're not going to be very successful. So you're going to need to break this down into much smaller steps. So you might start by teaching him just to sit in the spot that you want him eventually to sit in. When he's good at that, you might try walking to him from the door. When he's good at that, then you might start knocking on the door first, then taking him to a spot, walking up and down the hall, building up until eventually he can do that when a real person comes to the door as a surprise. So you break that down into lots of little steps and work through them all, gradually just adding back in the triggers and distractions that cause the problem in the first place. If you're having trouble with recall, maybe your dog's running off after other dogs. So instead of just trying to go for broke and trying to do, a recall across a football pitch with a little piece of chicken, start really small. Start teaching them to do a little mini recall, just a few feet towards you, and then reward, and repeat that over and over again. Build up the space that you are from your dog to you, so that happens very gradually, and then you can start to add distractions in. So when you can do it in a distraction-free environment, take him to the park when there are dogs playing far away, and practice your recall then, and get closer and closer and closer until eventually he can do this again with dogs playing. He wants to go and play, but he still will come back to you when you need him to. So you work through all your behaviors one at a time, break them all down, add the triggers in, add the distractions in, and before you know it, you'll have a new behavior that is exactly what you would prefer to have, rather than concentrating on what you don't want. I hope that's helped, and I'll see you again soon. Take care for now. Bye-bye.